Hiya! Whisper here from Germany. Travel setup. I do have my microphone though, so hopefully that sounds okay. But we have a double whammy. We got 2 rounds of tuning all at once. So I'm just gonna go over everything and clear stuff up, and then hopefully I don't need to pack this out again because this kind of sucks. Anyways, so the first set of tuning was the development notes, where Fatebound got a huge buff to the heads flip. The heads flip sucked really bad. This puts it much more in line with what Tails is. Tails does a lot more damage. So this is a much needed change to just kind of bring the flips in line and also bring up the baseline of Fatebound. So that's a good change. Big fan of that. Now, this all ability damage increased by 4%. A little bit strange. We did get a 15% aura buff. And then this is on top of that. So they zeroed out all of the numbers from the 15% aura buff and then put another 4% on top. So this is essentially the same as a 20% aura buff in total now. Which is a little weird, but, you know, not going to complain about more damage. The auto attack damage being added on is standard practice. And then Envenom and Crimson Tempest being increased by 10% on top of all of these aura things are also very interesting changes. Envenom, obviously our main finisher, it was already really high though. Like, we did a lot of Envenom damage, especially as Deathstalker. So seeing this Envenom damage here, a little bit strange. Now Crimson Tempest already cranked really hard in Mythic Plus, but I think bleeds in general are a little bit weak for the spec right now. So seeing Crimson Tempest damage getting buffed is, in my opinion, a good sign. I would like to see Rupture buffs. It feels like Rupture is doing a lot of its damage from things that aren't Rupture, such as Corrupt the Blood, Bone Spike, for example, Scent of Blood, right? There's all these effects that are attached onto Rupture, and Rupture itself doesn't really do any damage. So I would like to see some Rupture buffs, but Crimson Tempest is fine. And so I wasn't going to make a video just with these changes, because these are all kind of standard, overarching kind of general buffs, right? And then we got this one. And we got targeted with Deathstalker buffs, which I didn't feel was necessary. Deathstalker was already plenty strong, and much stronger than Fatebound. And so where the last changes put Fatebound back up to where Deathstalker was, these buffs have taken Deathstalker to an extreme. So I'm going to flip back and forth here a little bit. I have some sims to kind of go over some numbers. First things first, clear the witnesses, right? Next Fan of Knives after applying the mark deals additional damage and 1 additional combo point. So this is the current math, right? This is the current sim before any of the changes. Fan of Knives and single target on only Clear the Witness. This only casts when Clear the Witness is up, right? So only to take advantage of the buff is 0.7% worse. However, if you look at where that damage is actually coming from, you'll see that, sorry, where is it? Fan of Knives? Flies, Jesus. You have 0.4% from Fan of Knives and 0.2% from Clear the Witnesses. Well, if you're doing 0.2% at 20%, pretty simple math, at 100%, you're going to be doing 1%. So this is a 0.8% buff to Clear the Witnesses on this, like, really rickety kind of off-the-cuff sim that I just did. And it's basically equal. I mean, 0.8%, 0.7%, that's basically where it needs to be. Is Fan of Knives going to be used in single target now? Maybe, maybe not. It's really hard to tell. It's not like... Here's the thing, like, yes, it technically looks like it's equal or slightly better, but at the end of the day, if it's like 100 DPS better, you don't need to play around something like that for like the super omega min-max, right? Like, you can kind of just ignore it. Now, if it starts to get even better, like if it's 0.3, 0.4%, and like Clear the Witnesses starts interacting with stuff, like Shiv, Mastery, right? All of these things. If it starts interacting with things, and it gets big, and it starts scaling with a bunch of multipliers, then we're looking at like 0.4%, 0.5% better. And at that point, it's a serious thing of like you need to fan of knives in single target for Clear the Witnesses. Like that is something you have to do or you're just losing damage. If it's like within 0.1, 0.2%, like in that range, it's whatever. You can kind of blow over it and be like, well, whatever. It's just silly. But my fear is that with further tuning and bug fixes, it can continue to grow. And at that point, we will be looking at fan of knives in single target as a serious consideration that will be required of you as a rotational tool. Which, yeah. Yeah. Anyways, I'm just going to hide that. So the Deathstalker mark also got a huge buff. This is a 70% buff. I also have simmed... no, I have not simmed that. I put that here. That's for future. So the Deathstalker mark right now, 1.8%, 70% buff would put that up to 3%. So that's about 1.2% in total. It's fine. The mark itself doesn't really do anything for damage. And then the part I hate the most. Increasing the damage of your next ambush or mutilate. They keep buffing this goddamn thing. Oh my god. I hate this so much. I don't... Just take the damage from this next ambush or mutilate and put it into the mark itself. Like, we don't need this. Especially because it doesn't even work on Fan of Knives. So, like, in AoE, we're not getting any benefit from consuming the mark in that regard. Like, I don't know the exact number on what the ratio of damage is here. But I would assume that, like, if we say that a third of the mark's total damage is coming from this next ambush or mutilate buff, then we're losing out a third of that damage in AoE simply because it's not affecting Fan of Knives. I don't really get it. Also, generator damage, like, who asked for this? Who wants this? Nobody wants this, and they just keep buffing it. They did. It's just overly confusing, and it's a bonus effect that doesn't need to exist on the mark. Like, you consume the application, you deal the plague damage, job done, you know? Like, dust it off and we go home. You don't need to also increase... What is this doing? I don't understand. So anyways, mark itself, 1.2% just from this part. This 40% thing, I don't know, it's messy. Fatal Intent, this is a weird change. If you don't know how to read spell data, it's a little bit confusing. Fatal Intent basically was a copy-paste of the Ink Pod Trinket from... God, what was it? Eternal Palace. Right? Yeah. Eternal Palace with Ashara. And so it did flat damage because that's how things worked back then. And so now you see that it says 0 times 1 plus versatility. That's not actually a 0. This is the placeholder value because now it scales with attack power. So it scales with things like agility, right? So if you get an agility boost, you'll get this. It also scales with versatility, obviously. It's still in the formula. But this basically just means it scales with gear instead of doing flat damage. Does that make a difference? I don't think so. It's going to be doing the same damage, which is basically... basically nothing. So, yeah, whatever. So now, Lingering Darkness, Momentum of Despair, Singular Focus, Symbolic Victory. I'm going to get back to Singular Focus and Momentum of Despair. Lingering Darkness and Symbolic Victory are on a choice node, so let's compare those. Lingering right now, 1.2%, right? No Lingering to Lingering. This is a 1.2% difference. And we see that Lingering went from 10 to 20. So, whoop-de-doo, very easy. Just double the number. Now it's a 2.4% talent. Fair enough. It's 1.2% of a buff, same as the Deathstalker mark, also 1.2% of a buff. GG, well played. So we're at a total of like 2.5%. Symbolic Victory, you might notice, kinda stinks. So this is 0.6% before the buff, and you'll notice that the buff is less than the Lingering Darkness buff, right? This got buffed by 50%. So this went from 0.6 to 0.9. And this went, this got doubled from 0.2 to 2.4. So Lingering Darkness is already double as strong as Symbolic, and then also gets buffed twice as hard? I don't understand what the point of this is. Because this needed to be like 30. It needed to be like 35, 40%. But for some reason, I guess they don't want that. But you'd never play this, right? Especially in AoE, like Lingering Darkness is just the better effect. Especially like during chain pulls. Like if you're chain pulling, Deathmark expires, right? You do your first pull, you Deathmark your prio target, the prio target dies, you chain pull into the next pack. Now you're doing 30 seconds of increased nature damage. More caustic spread? I don't really get what the point of Symbolic Victory is if it's going to be way weaker than Lingering and also worse by design in basically every situation, right? Like Lingering Darkness is just strictly better in single target in like a raid situation. And it's also better in AoE in Mythic Plus situation. The only time Symbolic Victory would ever be better is if for some reason you need to burst a little bit harder. But the damage increase that you're doing in burst, like I can pull up the graphs. The damage increase isn't here, right? You'll see here it's a peak of like, what, 1.9-ish? And then this peak is like 1.6? Okay, so 1.9 and 1.6. Without Symbolic, we're looking at 1.89, 1.6. It's just like, what are we doing? Like, this is... Huh? Like, what a... This is the same. Like, these peaks are the same because Symbolic itself has no presence. It's so weak. So I don't get what we're doing here, right? I don't understand what we're doing here. It's very obvious that the tuning on these is wrong, and yet the balancing that's happening is not reflecting that in any way. I don't know if they're scared of this being too broken or something, if you can combo it with the capstone. But lining these up with the capstone naturally is already incredibly difficult, right? Like playing around the capstone and lining up the capstone when you need it is already pretty difficult to begin with. And so I don't understand what we're doing here. I mean, I'm gonna look and see if it's possible to sync these up, but it's gameplay again that no one really asked for. Like, if the gameplay has to be hold the capstone, don't finish on 7, wait until, like, if your Shiv is up, if you're going into cooldowns in the next 10 seconds, don't finish on 7, hold the capstone, right? But then you also don't want to do that because they just buff the hell out of the mark, so you want to consume the mark. It's asking you to consume the mark. Like, are we supposed to consume the mark or are we supposed to hold it? Right? Because every time I sit there with the capstone buff and I don't consume it, I'm losing uptime on the mark, right? I'm losing uptime on singular focus. I'm losing uptime on the auto attack buff, hunt them down. I'm losing uptime to be able to cast more Deathstalker marks in general, right? So I'm every time I use a finisher and I have the capstone and I'm not using a finisher on 7, I am losing damage. But then there's stuff like this where it's like they're scared that the damage loss that I'm getting is going to make me want to sit there and be like, oh, well, don't worry, my next Shiv, capstone buff plus 15%. Ooh, right? Now I'm going to crit for 3.2 million instead of like 3. What are we doing? What are we doing? It doesn't make sense. This tree makes me so mad, man. This tree makes me so upset, and I don't understand why we can't just have nice things. Anyways, finishing it up, singular focus, 3 to 5%. If this does not work with caustic, It does not matter. I don't know who needs to hear this. Singular Focus doesn't work with Caustic Spatter, at least as of right now. If it doesn't work with Caustic Spatter, it is useless. It's legitimately pointless. Caustic Spatter is such a large portion of your damage that at this point, if it's 3% or 5% or 15%, it does not matter, right? Your Crimson Tempest on your off targets, your couple of Garrotes, your couple of Ruptures, they're nice and all, but this doesn't work with Sanguine Blades, which is already a fat L. That's like 10% of your overall damage gone. It doesn't work with Caustic. Like, Sanguine and Caustic combined are easily 20% of your damage in keys. And it doesn't work with 20% of your damage. Like, I don't get it. Like, I don't understand, right? And the entire time, you're trying to hit your marked target, so the Envenoms you're pumping in to get Caustic, the Kingsbane you're putting into the target to get Caustic, the Deathmark duplicating the bleeds onto that target don't count, right? This is purely AoE coming back in, but you're not... They've designed the spec to not do AoE, right? They've designed the spec to be like, oh, Caustic Spatter. Like, spread your bleeds, get your bleeds up, Caustic Spatter. And now we have a situation where it's spread your bleeds, and that's it, right? Caustic Spatter doesn't work. Sanguine Blades doesn't work. So it's literally just your bleed damage. At which point... Why? Why? I don't get it. Momentum of Despair. This is the one change that won't make me lose my mind. Crit damage is interesting. Now, the problem that comes with this is if you take Momentum of Despair, and I am going to despair, guess what? You know, we're back to Clear the Witnesses. This is going to be 1%. That means that this is going to be slightly positive. Fan of Knives and single target, slightly positive. Guess what? This is just the Momentum of Despair is just a free talent. Now, am I saying that you should get a crit with Fan of Knives in order to get the crit damage bonus on Fan of Knives, in order to make Fan of Knives single target better? No. However, you know, these things happen. And so there's building blocks here, right? Fan of Knives single target with Clear the Witnesses, already good. Momentum of Despair, increasing the crit damage of Fan of Knives. That's more Fan of Knives damage. And then guess what? One moment. You know what else exists? Throne Precision, 10% crit strike chance, and always apply your poisons. And you know what sucks? I'll show you what sucks. If I take a single target raid build, right, and I do this, if I take away Bone Spike and put it into dashing, this Doomblade point is terrible. Now, where are you going to put it, right? This Doomblade point can only go a certain amount, like in certain places. It can go to Master Assassin. That seems to be okay. It could go to Twist the Knife. This is terrible. It could go to Vicious Venoms. This is terrible. You know what we haven't considered? Throne Precision. Now again, is this good enough right now in order to do? No. No, you would not do this. This is bad. Hypothetically, though, you could, right? And that's the thing that scares me. Is not that you're going to do it right now. It's that you could do it. Now, Mutilated Flesh right here, Doomblade, is still 0.8%, and it's also a stack of Lethal Dose. So all in all, it's still like a talent that's worth 1.5%. I don't think there's any world in which Doomblade could possibly be so weak that we take Throne Precision. But if it's an AoE fight, you know what I mean? If it's an AoE fight, if you're already taking Crimson Tempest, if it's a big fan of knives. In Mythic Plus, if you're already taking Crimson Tempest, you're already taking Throne Precision. So if you're already taking Throne Precision, that already has increased crit strike chance. And then with the increased crit strike chance, you already have the increased crit strike damage. And you're already fan of knivesing, so you're gonna get this to proc. And then you have Clear the Witness. Like, you see how this builds? It fits together, and it's not looking great. I don't like it. I'm so sad. I don't know what to say, man. Yeah. And so all of the tuning that they just did with Fatebound, right? They buffed the Fatebound heads. That put it back in line. This completely ruins it again, because this alone, just off napkin math, is easily 4 to 5% of a damage buff for Deathstalker in single target. In AoE, it's probably more, because Clear the Witnesses is kind of cracked. But just in single target, this is already 4 to 5%. And that means that it went from Deathstalker being 4 to 5% ahead to Fatebound being roughly equal for all of like 6 hours, and now Deathstalker's back up 4 to 5%. I mean, I don't know what to say. I can complain all I want. I can point out things that I don't like. I can point out things that are cringe. But we live in a world where we're playing 30 seconds of increased nature damage after a cooldown, which was the most hated tier set bonus of Dragonflight. We're playing Fan of Knives in single target, possibly, especially in Mythic Plus when you're already taking Fan of Knives related points. We're getting increased damage on our next Ambush or Mutilate. I mean, even if it's there numerically, half of this tree is things that we have been vocally outspoken about hating, and they keep buffing it and they keep adding it in, and I don't like. If they're listening to feedback, that's great, and they have been fixing a lot of bugs, but I don't know, like, I don't understand how this got designed in a way that has such painful gameplay moments. Like, Fan of Knives in single target is insanely cringe. I'm just, like, we had this in Legion. In Legion, we had a legendary that increased Fan of Knives damage. There was Hidden Blades for BFA, as well as Shadowlands had Hidden Blades, right? Yeah. Bottom row in the middle had Hidden Blades. And they all promoted Fan of Knives in single target. And you know what happened? Nobody played it, because nobody wants to Fan of Knives in single target. And then we're like, oh, this tier set blows. Why the hell do I want nature damage after my cooldowns? I want them during my cooldowns. What does Blizzard do? They add it back in. Help. Somebody, please. Am I crazy? Like, I don't know. I can keep going. I'm not going to. I hope that you guys are having a good pre-patch. I am losing my mind. Anyways, Baya, please fix the spec. Spec is fine, but the class tree still sucks. Where's the class tree changes? And this is terrible. I can't explain. I don't know what Deathstalker is. I don't know why they keep doing this. Please anyone. Okay, bye.